Hello, America. Hello, friends. Welcome to your Leo Nation. I'm your host, the Chief, Mark Garrett, the Leo Nation, where you know what we stand for, and that is the rule of law, a civil society, and self-responsibility. And we have knocked it out of the park today with guests who I think exemplifies those tenets, those principles. Someone I have had the chance to briefly speak with before the podcast starts, and comes with a incredible reputation. I am talking about the sheriff of Walton County, Florida, Michael Adkinson. Sheriff, thank you so much for being a part of today's show.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Well, we are excited. You know, there's not enough leadership, not enough real leadership in law enforcement. I think that's really what we're up against. There's plenty of external forces. There's no doubt about that. Those forces are real. But what we need to combat is internal leadership. And I think our audience is going to find out that you're one of the people that is doing just that. So just a little bit about you. May embarrass you a little bit, but one of the things that I really appreciate in the sense of your being a leader of that sheriff's department in Walton County, Florida, is that you're really a homegrown kid, are you not?
I am, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. So you spent a lot of time in law enforcement in Florida, a few different agencies. I'm going to hand it over to you to give a little self-bio, but you started in Walton County, kind of grew up there, you moved around, your education, worked for a local police department. And I won't go through line by line because you might turn red with some of the accolades that you've received and honors here. But I mean, past president for a Sheriff Association, Man of the Year 2011, and so on and so on. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and if you want to, you can just kind of continue about Walton County itself, kind of separate from law enforcement, just about yourself and about the culture there in Walton County.
So, you know, Chief, I think a couple of things, and it's interesting the path you go on in this calling. I don't call it a job, right? It's a calling. It's something we're led to. I grew up in this county, Walton County, which for your listeners runs from the Alabama line to the coast. So it's about 1,200 square miles in the western panhandle of Florida. And this was an extremely rural area when I was here. I was a kid growing up. I went away to school, went to the Florida State University, and really spent the next 20 years there. And, you know, the strangest thing happened while I was gone. This county changed. It went from a really very rural area that nobody was familiar with to, I think I looked last week, it is the 6th fastest growing county in the United States of America. Has the fastest growing city in Florida. Now, it's still primarily a small county. You know, we're talking give or take 90,000 residents. But here's the kicker. About 5 million visitors a year. So we are a tourist destination and a county that is bifurcated by a bay. So you have some folks with some phenomenal assets coming here, visiting some of the most pristine beaches in the country. And then you have a rural area here, you know, about 800 square miles of farmland. And it's a great place. I moved back here. I never thought I'd live back again in Walton County. I was at the Tallahassee Police Department for a number of years. And then had been the chief at a small agency. And, you know, when the opportunity came to, just a funny side story, Chief, I said I'd never work for a sheriff. This is too political. Can't work for a sheriff. But, you know, if you want to hear God laugh, you tell him your plans. So,
well, that's interesting because, you know, we're going to talk about that later on about being an elected sheriff as opposed to an appointed chief.
Right.
And some of those pros and cons, I think, quite frankly, most of them are pros. But we're definitely going to get into that. But I do get the politics of being a sheriff. So that's something else. You know, I spent a lot of time, my wife and family and I spent a lot of time in Walton County. Matter of fact, we've fallen in love with it, absolutely fallen in love with it. And if you'd asked me a couple of years ago, you know, was ever going to leave California, and you know, where would you go? And be like, I don't know, maybe, possibly. But I can tell you right now, we're going to end up in Florida. We're going to end up in Walton County. And one of the reasons that we're going to end up there is because of the work. Even though we've never met in person, didn't meet you there when we were a number of times I've been to Walton County, but it's obviously a result of some of the things that you and your deputies do to make Walton County such a wonderful place for someone to raise a family, someone to retire, someone to vacation. And you are actually walking the walk. And I can't wait to get into some of that and deep in the weeds as we go. So you talked about Walton County, the size of it, and really the little bit of the culture. I do want to talk about that sheriff versus chief, being appointed. I was a
Sure.
chief. Now again, in the Highway Patrol, a chief is a 2-star.
Sure.
There are 8 field division commanders. But what are some of the advantages of being a sheriff? Now again, I'm going to just speak real quick. I think one of the advantages is that you're able to actually make decisions based on what you think is right and wrong, what's good for the people you serve, for the people that work for you, and not necessarily what makes the superior happy. So with that said, I'll just take it away.
Well, listen, that's philosophically the main difference, because I think, I made the joke of saying I said I would never work for a sheriff's office because it's I said, hey, listen, it's too political. And I'm gonna elaborate the difference between a sheriff's office and a sheriff's department, by the way, in just a second. But the interesting thing about the office of sheriff, particularly as it's structured in the state of Florida, it's an order of magnitude less political. I can tell you, being as a police chief, and I'd previously worked for the state of Florida. And listen, if you're a police chief, it's a tough spot to be in because you have typically an assistant city manager, a city manager, maybe a mayor, X number of councilmen, all having a direct input and say into the way things are done, and they exert really a quiet influence on there, and sometimes not so quiet. The thing about being a sheriff is that we are single focus, right? Which is public safety. What is in the best interest of the citizens we serve? And I find it interesting that it's really the only level of law enforcement in the United States in which the people have a direct say. Now, I'm not talking about the rule of law, because I think that's what this country is based on. That's what makes this such a unique country is this adherence to the rule of law. But I can tell you that if you're in Orange County, Florida, millions of people, or if you're in Gilchrist County, Florida, smallest county in the state of Florida, there's some fundamental differences, right? And there's philosophical differences about what is important in that community, what crime, how you focus on crime, how you focus on public safety as it relates to everyday way of life. Interestingly enough, the sheriff's office here in Walton County, by example, and some of your listeners might find this interesting, we're also professional fire rescue. So this morning, my firefighter, EMT, paramedics were recognized as the top medical fire service in the state of Florida, this county, which we're particularly proud of. And you say, well, how does a sheriff end up running a fire department? And it's a question I've often asked myself, if I'm being honest. But I will tell you, when a few years ago, when that came into, when that came to be, and we were speaking to our board of county commissioners, and I'll talk about how a sheriff's office is structured in a second. But somebody said, well, sheriff, a fire department shouldn't be with the sheriff's office. It should report to a mayor or a city council. I said, well, maybe. I mean, should it be with the people that pave roads, pick up trash, pass ordinances, and cut back trees, pick up garbage, or should it be with people that run toward the sound of gunfire and the smell of smoke? The people that work 365 days a year, the people that emergency training, the people that put themselves in harm's way, that put service over self. I said, you know what? You're absolutely right. It should be with people that pick up trash. And I said it just off the cuff. I said it off the cuff, but I'll tell you, it's fundamentally true. And I think our fire union, we were talking to, we talked to those folks when they first came over. They like that in a sheriff's office, we are dedicated to a philosophy of public service through the adherence of policing. And I say that a little bit different than law enforcement, because if you're law enforcement, you're looking for something to enforce, right? The very terminology means something has to be broken for you to enforce. We're a public safety policing agency, which I think in the truest sense of the word is about improving the quality of life for the citizens we serve through, advancing services that make them safer, that make their community safer in whatever holistic capacity that is. So it's interesting, really, in sheriffing in Florida.
Well, it is interesting, and I guess it's as ironic as it is interesting that you have to, and I'm glad you did, state the fact that the job is to enforce the law.
Mhm.
And look, I come from a totally different culture in law enforcement than you're used to, Sheriff. Here in Los Angeles, Southern California, California in general, things evolved over the 3 decades that I served the California Highway Patrol. And I hate to say it, I think in far too many ways, not the right direction. And we got away from doing those things that actually uh, mean something, that actually represent what a police agency is there to do, and that's to enforce the law. That is to deal with bad people. Very, very small percentage of bad people, they're out there, but that was our job. We've morphed into social justice and equity and all these things that have nothing to do, in my humble opinion, about the rule of law. And so I'm glad to hear you say that. Let me ask you this about the fire department. And I knew this from my trips out there, but I never really thought about it, too deeply. Story of my life.
Mine too.
So, what does that look like as far as chain of command? Of you being the sheriff, is there a fire chief, or how does that actually work?
Sure. So think of it like, again, it actually makes a lot of sense in the regard that, so as a sheriff, you typically have an undersheriff or a chief deputy, and then the chief fire officer, the fire chief.
Uh-huh.
And so they report to essentially the chief, what would be the equivalent of an undersheriff. We have a variety of operations under us as well too that are outside the traditional scope maybe of some sheriff's offices, but it actually works really well. And I'll tell you what, we learned a lot. I love joking with our firefighters, but they do a heck of a good job with incident command. And just the ability to inculcate, incident command really started with the fire service. Quite honestly, they do it better than law enforcement traditionally does. And it was a chance for us to really merge and blend those operations, I think, pretty well. I've been well pleased with it. Broward County, Florida, Broward County is a huge organization. They have about, I think, 5,000 deputies, give or take. They're also fire rescue. And so, there is a template for this in Florida, but I've been well pleased with how this has come together.
Well, it's really interesting. Now, one thing I will say about the agencies here in California is that because we deal with so many natural disasters, so it's wildfires, earthquakes, of course, civil unrest. We're the epicenter of that, and then of course here in Los Angeles County, it's the epicenter of the epicenter. It's the eye of the storm. With that, I will say this: I wouldn't have said it when I was chief, just because I didn't have much class. But but as far as ICS, as far as working with allied agencies and the fire department specifically, we're talking about, they do a fantastic job. LA County Fire, LA City Fire, even the smaller agencies, Burbank, Pasadena, they do a fantastic job. I'm glad to hear the same is true there in Walton County. I'm not surprised, but I'm glad to hear it. There's one thing that you mentioned when we're talking about enforcing the law, and that was service to others, about what you're there for. And that takes me to the next discussion I want to have, or topic I want to touch on. I was going through your website a little while back, and I came across a section called Employee Expectations.
Right.
And I'll tell you right now, I was in seventh heaven reading that. And I encourage anybody listening to, watching this podcast, go to Walton County Sheriff's Department and click on Employee Expectations. And I'm going to let you expand on this and talk about it. But it almost seems like, because of the world in which we live now in general, it almost seems humorous because it's so in your face. It is so stark. It is so non-compromising. It is unabashedly proud of the principles of the Walton County Sheriff's Department. Yeah. And for example, one of them was about, if you want to have a certain hair color, this is not the job for you. If you think that you're going to not miss your kids' sporting event, this is not the job for you. If you think you're going to not work Christmas, this is not the job for you. And it goes on and on and on and on. And this is not only for your employees, but it's for potential applicants. So I want for you to expand on that philosophy. And by the way, any other bullet points from employee expectations you'd like to talk about?
Right. So,
but I love it.
So, that's an interesting thing. I spend a fair amount of time. I sit on the Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission for the state of Florida, which is the disciplinary arm for state law enforcement. And, we continue to see applicants come into this profession with, I don't want to say unrealistic, because that would be giving it too much gravitas. They simply, they have no idea what level of expectation this profession has. And, we found that we were spending, months getting applicants, get them in there, get them out of academies, coming to us. And, and they'd say things like, well, I don't want to work at night. I can't go in there by myself. I'm going to miss Christmas. I need this day off. Well, I can post whatever I want. That's not the sheriff's, we have a First Amendment right. And, I'll never forget, I had a former undersheriff, and he said, it works like this. If your personal life becomes the sheriff's problem, it's going to end poorly. But we really have applicants that when we came in, they really have, I said this, I'm not their parent. I didn't raise them, but you may have done that at your house, but you won't do it at ours. And so what we did is we put these little tongue-in-cheek, but very blunt, very in language a layperson can understand, of what our expectations are. Just as an example, you'll be at work on time. That's not a suggestion. It's not, we hope you get around to it, because to be late is to be disrespectful for somebody else's time. We're not going to be tolerant of that. You're not going to be drunk in public. One of them, I think it says you won't be drunk in public. You're not going to be at a wet t-shirt contest dancing on the bar. Not going to have it. You won't work here. You can in the privacy of your home, you can do what you want to do, as long as it doesn't. But anything you do that brings disregard to this profession that I've dedicated my life to, that tarnishes that star, we're going to have a problem with it. And we, I fundamentally believe this, that we hire character and we teach aptitude, right? We hire character, we teach aptitude. I can teach job skills. We can teach you job skills, but your character, if I have to tell you it's a bad idea and you don't know that, if you're going to come in and you're going to, I'm sure, Chief, you've dealt with this, as we would always get these applicants coming in, and we still polygraph. We're old school like that. We still polygraph. We run credit checks and all these good things. And one of my captains at the time says, Sheriff, every cop's financing 3 ex-wives, a boat payment, and a gun payment. I said, that's true. That's true. But they didn't start that way. So, we're trying very hard to say, this is our expectations. And we don't want you to be surprised. Certain things are not okay. They may be okay in other professions, but they're not in this one. And so what we found is, at the bottom, there's a statement of these job expectations that says, if anything about these expectations give you pause, we suggest you discontinue the hiring process.
I love it.
Yeah, let's do it now. Yeah. Let's get that out of the way. Let's get it over with. So
I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just so excited about that statement. In other words, laying it on the line, and not, listen, we all, I said former law enforcement, but all of those who were in management positions in law enforcement or otherwise recruitment positions, we all do the best we can. We spend a lot of energy trying to find good recruits, good applicants. There's no doubt about that.
Sure.
But when law enforcement starts getting desperate to fill positions,
bad things happen.
Sheriff, you're absolutely right. I use the analogy about the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is the smallest, obviously, branch of the military, of the 4 big ones, I guess 5 big ones now with Space Force. But the point is that the Marines, to their credit, have always emphasized how exclusive they are. In other words, what there's virtually nobody out there who can become a Marine. And it's worked to their advantage over the last 200 years that they've done this plus. And I certainly believe that the approach you're taking, which is similar, is the right way to go, even if it may discourage one or two otherwise good applicants. I think it's so important for law enforcement to let people know that there's a reason that most people cannot do this job, because most people are just not suited for it. If you think you're one of the few, the proud, the sheriffs, then come on over. So I love what you're doing. I wish more law enforcement did that. And standards are not something that we can screw with if we want to protect the people we're supposed to be protecting. So I applaud you for that, and keep it up.
Well, thank you. You know, and I'll tell you, when we got to this point, one of the other things we said is, listen, if you go to any organization, and we did this in our organization, we called in about 60 folks, just kind of a sampling of supervisors, and said, look, if I ask you to give me the name of 3 people, don't say the name, don't shout them out, but if I gave you a sheet of paper and said, listen, write the name down of 3 people who, every time you see their name on a schedule with you, you go, oh, everything's a conspiracy. They're organizational terrorists. They're sitting around in their underwear at 3 a.m. writing the anonymous email, right? That everything is, everything's a problem. We all know it. They've moved them around 3 or 4 times. And I'm going to ask you this, and is this a technical term? So they suck, and you don't want to work with them. So let me ask you this question. If I ask you to write the name of 3 people down on a sheet of paper, I'm willing to bet my badge that out of this group of 60 people, at least 2 names will be on everybody's list. And I said, does anybody disagree with that? And everybody's like, no, that's true. I said, now let me ask you this. Why are they still working here? See, because the same fundamental truth applies to retention as it does into hiring. Somewhere along the line, we say we're so short or things are so tough that we retain. And I think it's what gets cops in problems, is we retain people that we need to let go. And I think there's absolutely no problem with saying, listen, there's a shelf life, and it's time for you to consider another profession. Maybe this is not the place for you anymore. But we're so afraid of doing that we bring those young men and women in, and we let them become adversely affected by those folks, these organizational terrorists, if you will. And I think setting high standard, and listen, no agency is perfect, and no employee is Mary Poppins every day, right? We all go through ebbs and flows in our careers. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about those folks that are absolutely institutional terrorists. And we have what we call an early warning system here, which is worked really well for the employees, believe it or not, which is, we kind of take a look at, like, say, for instance, rudeness complaints. If you get a certain number of rudeness complaints in a certain amount of time, you're referred to counseling. Now, and somebody said, oh, every cop was panicked about that, right? Oh my gosh, I got to go to counseling. But here's the truth. We could always write down the same names. We knew who was going to be, and it's interesting when it's different people. It's not one citizen comes in contact. It's not 2 citizens. It's not 1 employee. When everybody that's coming in contact with you is saying you've got an issue, the question is, and we all know it, why haven't we dealt with it? Mm-hmm. And so that's something we're trying to say, how to, Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office, we actually stole a program from them, and we've continued with it. This philosophy of better, not bitter. So even our disciplinary approach, we feel like intervening early in a deputy sheriff's career, maybe they need some help. Maybe they're going through some trauma. Maybe some things on that to me can be different than somebody who is a true disciplinary issue, that organizational terrorist. So we just find that deputies perform better and that they are happier when you stay engaged in their careers and help guide them, and by the way, it shows you care, quite frankly. For our deputies, we have, and I don't know if you guys used to do this with the highway patrol, but you think about it, we send all these deputies and troopers to academies, right? And they're in the best shape. They've had their psychological counseling. They've had their mental health counseling. They're physical, all this stuff. And we cut them loose and we never do it again.
Yeah.
We never do it again, and we know factually that the average span of a full career law enforcement officer is about 5 years after they retire. Yeah. And that's because we don't adhere to the same level of discipline. And I mean discipline in a positive sense, not discipline in suspending you, but discipline into, we're going to help you take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. We instituted here a mandatory physical fitness test every 6 months. It's really a physical abilities test. You have to maintain that to keep your job here for the rest of your career. Now, people say that's harsh. Well, it's the same standard for men and women, same standard for a 65-year-old or a 10-year-old. Now,
wait a minute. I think you said something inappropriate there. That you have the same standards for all your employees.
Yeah, absolutely, it's same.
Oh my God! I guess we're canceled tomorrow.
Yeah, we're probably done here. And you know what I told you? Yeah. Somebody said the other day, and they said, well, I remember when we first did this, the unions, other folks said, hey, you're not going to do this. I said, well, we'll see you in court.
Good.
Because we're not going to lower our standard, because this is something I'm not doing to you, I'm doing for you.
Excellent.
Because here's what I know about cops. If people say, well, Sheriff, why do you run it twice a year? Why not once? Because I know cops, and they'll wait to the last 2 weeks to try and work on this stuff. And it doesn't make them physical specimens passing this test, but it does mean there's a level of physical ability that they can do their job, right? That's why we don't separate between men and women or age, because it doesn't matter. There's a certain set of job skills you have to do. And it's not, you don't get a sliding scale on that, but we're doing it for them. And it's the same thing with we do mandatory physicals every 3 years. You're going to go see a doctor. I don't get the results of those physicals. It's not for me. It's for them. We send them to all safety sensitive positions, have to go to mental health counseling and a group therapy, every 3 years. And we said, listen, and we had several who said, listen, Sheriff, we'll quit. You can't make us do this. I said, well, I can, and I am, because I'm doing it not to you. I'm doing it for you, because I want you to be able to stay married. I don't want you to develop drinking problems. I don't want you to die of that stress-related heart attack and type 2 diabetes, because I didn't care. And I tell it all the time. I manage like mama. Mama don't care if you like it. I care if you're safe and you're successful. And if you don't like it, the Highway Patrol's hiring every day. We got to pick on the Highway Patrol, right? That's my.
And listen, look, out here in California, the LAPD, they say, hey, you know what CHP stands for, right? I go, yeah, what does it stand for? Can't handle police work. Yeah, I know. I've heard it 1,000 times. And then when I was stopping in the carpool lane with their trailer, they call me sir. So anyway,
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
but
well, what's fun, Chief? Interesting, because the Florida Highway Patrol, Colonel Gene Spalding's a friend of mine, and we serve on the commission, the Criminal Justice Standards and Training, the disciplinary body for the state of Florida. Both Colonel Spalding and I. And we, it's interesting, because I tell you what, the Highway Patrol, and I won't say this, hopefully Colonel Spalding won't hear this till later. But I think FHP, the Florida Highway Patrol, did such an excellent job of years of branding. And I stole that from them. We stole that from them. This idea of branding and esprit de corps. You mentioned the Marine Corps, but it's the Highway Patrol did for many, many years. They did an excellent job of that. And then, of course, they face struggles, as every agency has. But listen, we stole a lot of that from those folks, from their troopers, and the way they did business. And I think that's the way it should be,
Well, it should be. And listen, here, and again, I want to go back up a little bit, a couple of things just about standards you touched on, and not touched on, that you really articulated very well. But about the Highway Patrol, I said things have kind of gone the wrong direction in certain ways. I'll tell you this. I still believe the California Highway Patrol is one of the finest law enforcement agencies in the country, if not the world. It's the only one that I applied to in 1989 because of its reputation. And I think the CHP still leads there. So when I say things have gone the direction I'm not happy about, it just means it could be better. Doesn't mean they're not still great. And as far as, stealing from other agencies, my God, if you're not doing that, if you're not interested in learning from other professionals, Absolutely. It's exactly what leaders do. They show humility. They ask their peers or colleagues, their partners, hey, what are you doing right? What do you feel that you could improve on? Things like this. This is how we cross breed, how we learn from each other. It shows leadership. The other thing you talked about as far as standards, I want to ask you about that. Hey, you have the same standards no matter your age, no matter your sex, no matter what. Have you had any real institutional pushback or anything negative, or has it been overall positive for the department?
So I'll tell you the history of this, and I think understanding how we got there will help that. About 14 years ago, give or take, we had a situation where deputies became involved in a shootout, and there was a deputy who was unable to get themselves up off the ground effectively because of knee problems. Almost immediately after that, we had a situation where a deputy could not jump this fence. And I was new in office at the time, and I remember saying to the patrol major, I said, "Listen, he left his partner, the female deputy, jump the fence. She actually pulled the car up to the edge, jumped the fence, pursued a burglar, and I said, what about this other guy? Sheriff, at his age, he just can't get it. Well, that's not acceptable to me. That's not acceptable to me, because his inability to do that put other people at risk." And quite frankly, we were putting him at risk by not making him adhere to a standard that he used to could meet. We were putting him at risk. And I said, we're not going to do this. But we also knew we would face unprecedented legal challenges. I mean, I'm not, everything from, as I said to the unions, again, we're doing this for you, not to you. And you should be the greatest proponent of this. They were not, but they should be the greatest proponent of this, because I'm doing what you should be doing, which is looking out after your people. Mm-hmm. So we went out and found a job specialist PhD who looked at the tasks performed, and that was the key to it being successful. And we had about 2 years of a grandfather in. In other words, we built the course on our main campus, and we spent 2 years. I went out and ran it 2 days a week. Anybody come run it with a sheriff, walk it with a sheriff. I mean, you could just about walk it at the time. And, we said, but I said, I want you guys to understand, there is going to come a time this is going to count. This is going to count in the X number of, this is by this date, we all have to do it. And, obviously we have people that didn't think that was the case, or thought maybe we were suggesting it or whatever. And when that time came, I just said unequivocally, I'm not going to bend on there will be no bend on this matter. And of course, we had a certain number that didn't make it. But I think what most of the staff saw was the test was reasonable. It was fair. And it's not actually a physical fitness test. It's a physical abilities, a job abilities test. And when they saw that, they were like, hey, this man or woman, pick whatever deputy, they needed to retire. They were not capable of doing this job. And everybody around them knew that, but nobody would say it, because one of the things that happens with supervisors in law enforcement, nobody wants to have those hard conversations. Yep. Just like I talked about the people that nobody, people that nobody wants to work with, nobody wanted to work with, but nobody would tell them.
Yep.
And so I said, we're going to have that hard conversation. So yes, we faced, numerous lawsuits. We beat every one of them. We beat it on age, gender, you name it. So it has not been successfully challenged in the state of Florida in almost 15 years now.
Well, I tell you right now, I pray that I'm going to say this specifically and with purpose. I hope other heads of agencies have a chance to hear the things you just said. I said heads of agencies. I didn't say leaders, because you have a position means nothing about one's leadership.
Amen.
But I hope other people hear this. And even if you're not top of the food chain, other people within organizations, that you did something that a leader does. You did what you thought was right for your employees, for the people that they serve, despite what you knew was coming. That's leadership. And of course, here's the good news. Everything has worked out well in the legal sense. And by God, if it happens, so be it. You're still doing the right thing based on principle. And I am just absolutely grateful that you have. I know you've been there for about 12 years. You've been through, I'm sure, like I did as a chief, a lot of legal, wash cycles. Yeah. And
defendant is what they should call you.
Yeah, pretty much. So your leadership, Sheriff, it not only shows internally, but it shows in the job that you actually have to do, which you articulated earlier, which is to enforce the law.
Chief,
And
can I
yeah,
tell you something real quick you might find
yeah,
interesting? And yeah, this is before I say this, I want you to understand this is not I like Mike. This is just, and maybe it, and maybe this speaks to one of my major character flaws. But so interesting about the state of Florida, you serve at the will and pleasure of the sheriff. So you're technically not hired, you're bonded or appointed. And I came into office in 2008. I had not worked for the sheriff's office. I did not know, I had never set foot in the Walton County Sheriff's Office prior to being elected sheriff. And that's kind of an interesting side. I didn't know anybody. I didn't come up. I had no law enforcement background. I spent most of my career in Tallahassee, which is a large organization, 1,000 employees over there. It was a little bit different. And, so when we came in the building, about strange year in 2009, we had an abnormal amount of law enforcement involved shootings. It was strange. We haven't had anything like that since, and maybe that's the new election curse, right? Mm-hmm. And one of those was a shooting where a deputy sheriff ended up having to kill this individual, and what is essentially a suicide by cop. He ended up being unarmed, but basically run down the barrel of the gun, intimating that he had a weapon. This was about 3.5 months after I wasn't in office. And Florida has this really interesting caveat to its law, which says the sheriff can be held personally accountable for the conduct of his deputy sheriff. So you can be sued as an agency head, which happens pretty routinely. I'm sure, any of your listeners that have been in this business, that you get sued and you get sued as the agency head. Right. But in this particular case, when this lawsuit came down on this, I was being sued as the agency head, but they also sued me personally. And what they said is, as the sheriff, that I should not have retained this person, that I have the ability to pull their ticket and their certification. And I'll never forget, because I went home and I was talking to my wife about this at the time, and this thing, we were in federal court, and this thing was continuing to rock on. And basically, the attorneys came to us and said, "Listen, Sheriff, if you'll terminate this guy, if you'll let him go, it's in their words, it's a bad shooting, a sketchy shooting. Your deputy shot an unarmed man. They claimed he had disciplinary problems prior to us." And he said, "Listen, but if you'll let him go, we'll drop you personally, but we're going to sue you as the agency head, but you're not on the hook personally." And I said, I'll never get to that. I said, "Well, excuse me, explain that to me again. What are you saying again? If you'll if you'll terminate this deputy, then we'll drop you from this lawsuit." And I said, "I tell you what, sport, hell will freeze over before we do that. Hell, I promise you, under things that are not going to happen, I'm not firing that guy." And I remember going home. I couldn't buy a home for a couple of years, because if you remember, when you're asked to any kind of purchase, it says, essentially, are you pending lawsuit? Well, the official ones don't count, but when you're being sued personally, you have to list that. And I remember somebody said, "Do you know this deputy?" I said, "I've never seen him before in my life. Never met him. When I swore him in, but I know I'm not going to capitulate to sell one of my people out just for my own well-being." That particular moment with the deputies, who I'd never worked with, and unfortunately, there were 5 deputy sheriffs murdered in an adjoining county, in Okaloosa County, which is next door to us. Mm-hmm. That roughly in like a 2-year span right there. And one of those situations involved us being involved, and myself, unfortunately, because I got bad luck, being involved in a shootout with a bank robber there. Just bad luck, nothing more than I happened to be there when he came out, kind of deal. It bought me a level of credit with our deputies and our staff that I think helped show our organization that I was committed to their well-being first. And I think so. If you ask me what allowed us to make some of these really substantive, hard changes, is that I had the respect of our staff. And I don't take that lightly. I mean, I take that it means more to me than anything else in this business. But that our men and women working here support and respect. It allowed us to say, when we do these things to make us better, the boss is all in. And I in my mind, I think that was where it empowered us to make these really substantive changes that have paid a lot of dividends over the years. Now they don't need me, by the way. Now they don't need me. They do a great job. I'm kind of in the way.
I doubt that seriously. He says it's not all about Mike, to quote you, but I am so glad you told that story, because again, it goes right back to leadership, and it goes to buy-in, and when your team sees something like that, seeing you put yourself on the line, your ear on the line, they're willing to walk through fire for you.
Amen.
And I'm sure this is why you've been reelected numerous times to that position. So it's fantastic. It's just excellent. And I really mean this sincerely. I hope that, other heads of agencies, real leaders of agencies, are hearing this, because it will embolden people to do the right thing. They're saying, what, if Sheriff Adkinson can do this, if this is the behavior he engages in, I can and should be doing it as well. So kudos to you for that,
Chief. And the truth is, when you do embark upon these things, every attorney said you cannot make a mandatory physical fitness test. You cannot send people to mandatory count. You can. You just got to have the stomach to do it. Now, it's not that you can't. I mean, an attorney's favorite word is no, right? But I tell them I'm going to get sued either way, and I would rather be sued for trying to do what is the right. I believe I'm not always right, but what I believe to be the right thing. Then if we lose, we lose, and we'll walk that off. We'll deal with it.
Well, that's exactly right. And we can talk about negligent retention, because I have to have you back on again. And I'll throw out one name that all of us who actually believe in the rule of law and our personnel doing the right thing, that's Derek Shaw in Minneapolis. That's the poster child case of negligent retention.
Absolutely.
And aside from what happened to George Floyd, why he died and things like that, it's a separate issue from negligent retention. That's why the city of Minneapolis wrote that huge check to George Floyd's family. It's because he should have been fired a decade ago. So
listen, Chief, that is, that you just absolutely touched on it. Someone's failure to address his issues, for whatever reason that is, when it's a failure of leadership, and it's a failure. So management is fundamentally the art of control, right? The failing to do that, failing to address that early on, allow that behavior to grow. And by the way, the question is, had it been dealt with, would he have grown into being that officer? Would he
Probably
have become
not.
the guy that later? Because the truth is, when you see him, he doesn't think he's killing that guy. I mean, that's the bottom line. He's doing it with disregard for his well-being and safety. That's a separate issue. But he's not intending to murder that guy. I mean, let's be pragmatic for a second.
I'm with you. I agree with that.
But the truth is that disregard, that disdain for that individual, for George Floyd, and that's, guarantee you, that's a behavior, as you well know, that was manifest probably every day he was on the job.
Absolutely right.
It was people saw it.
It was callous. It was arrogant.
Absolutely.
And this is what we cannot have a law enforcement. That idiot.
You got to fire these people. You got
to fire them.
They got to go. They got to go. And we, I try to, what I always say is we can discipline and we can correct areas of deficiency and technical skills, and maybe even made a bad judgment, right? It's my job, or our job, to make sure those are corrected. You're trained better, not bitter, right? But if you have malfeasance in your heart, if you're going to cheat, lie, steal, abuse your authority, I'm going to do everything within my influence to end your career. I don't make any bones about that. I do everything I can to end careers for those people that I don't believe should be there. And about every 4 months, I sit on this disciplinary board for criminal justice standards and training. And I am appalled. I mean, fundamentally appalled at the people that are allowed to keep their certificates.
Mhm.
They wouldn't. When I was first appointed to that board by Governor Ron DeSantis, right after he came into office, I remember getting the first briefing for basically trials we were going to have on these disciplinary hearings. And a captain handed me, goes, "Sheriff, I'm just going to tell you before you look at this, you're not going to like this." He said, "I know you. You're not." And I thought, they're going to kick me off this thing because this is not acceptable.
Yeah.
But I think all of us as leaders in this profession, we have to say, there's a different. I'll give you an example. The former commissioner of Department of Law Enforcement here in Florida, he said something that has grabbed me, and I think is absolutely true. You can do something that's lawful but awful, right? But also means that you don't need to be the police anymore, right? Now, and you've got to be able to differentiate between those things. In other words, you don't need to be criminally charged, but you don't need to be the police.
Right.
But I'll bet my badge that there were indicators before we ever got to that. Before we ever got to it, that somebody did not want to address because they were afraid of hurting your feelings, or they were afraid of being sued, or, I guess I'm coming across like Attila the Hun a little bit, but I think we're doing them a disservice. We fired a deputy sheriff right after I came into office that had a DUI, and I fired him. And I said to someone at the time, had he worked for us the previous 5 years, I don't think we'd be here. I don't, because he had numerous speeding issues that nobody had dealt with. And I think it encouraged this behavior of above the law. I'm above the law, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't think we did him any justice. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I think that's one of the things. Everything doesn't have to be chopped their head off. And it shouldn't be. It should be corrective and trying to make staff better. But you do staff, you do our profession absolutely zero good when you fail to address this.
Right. Well,
and by the way, if your problem is if you got a problem in your heart, you got to get rid of those folks immediately. Yeah. I don't care how short you are. I don't care how. I listened to. Do you remember the chef Anthony Bourdain? He was a pretty famous chef, had a TV show, No Reservations. And
yes, I do.
So I read his book, and he's pretty profane, potty mouth, and, and say another way. So I read his book, and in his book, he said something to the effect of, I don't care how good or how talented somebody is as a chef, if they cause disruption, get rid of them, because nothing they ever do will make up for the disruption they cause in your kitchen. Thought that was interesting. About 2 weeks later, I was listening to a lecture from the vice president of BMW USA. And he said, I don't care how capable or competent this sales manager is. I don't care if he's making BMW more money than anybody else. There's nothing he'll do that can make up for the disruption he caused if you don't discipline and take care of him. And I'm like, wow, when a chef and the vice president of BMW says it, I bet it's applicable to what I do.
Right.
Yeah. So we've tried to adhere to that.
Well, principles are principles.
Principles are principles.
Across every
and they're not
profession.
Negotiable, by the way.
No, they're not.
Negotiable.
No, in fact, I just wrote a piece yesterday that I'll publish here pretty soon. But I talk about that 2 + 2 always equal 4.
Always.
It never changes, and principles never change. Virtues never. Circumstances do. Decisions change, but principles and virtues never change. If they do, we live in a chaotic world without any boundaries whatsoever. So speaking of chaotic world and boundaries, I want you to talk about, because I did talk to your chief of operations when I had breakfast with him. He told me a story about really your attention to detail, your zero tolerance policy really for law breaking in the county. Something that unfortunately is foreign here in the golden state of California. Everything is negotiable here at the very best. But he told me about one aspect, a lot of things, and you can expand on this. But he talked about how you deal with spring breakers and where they end up if they may have consumed alcoholic beverages before their 21st birthday. And that was the foundation. He told me more, but I really want you to talk about how, as a sheriff, how, as a department, you see, quote unquote, low level crime and how you deal with it and what the effects are.
So listen, quality of life initiatives. It's certainly not my idea. It's certainly not new. Many of us have been around long enough. Remember the old broken pane theory of law enforcement.
Mhm.
But guess what? Just because it's old doesn't mean it doesn't work.
Right.
And our philosophy is that if you want people to come to Walton County, if I'm trying to get the chief here to come and buy a home in Walton County, you got to have 4 things, right? Which is you have to have good roads, good infrastructure, good schools for our children, good healthcare, hospitals, and people have to feel safe. And quality of life initiatives, loud music, disorderly conduct, graffiti, all those things that are not sexy, if you will, for many organizations, they undermine the rule of law when they're not enforced, and they undermine the quality of life of people that live in these communities. Now, I'm not talking about jackbooted thugs. What I'm talking about is a reasonable response and thoughtful attention to detail that everything matters. I had a lieutenant years ago, at the Tallahassee Police Department, Mark Wheeler, and I remember him saying something. And this, by the way, this guy looked like Superman, right? 6'4", 250 pounds, solid muscle, and a young patrol officer was beside me and check on him. We were just complaining about the state of the world, and this young officer said, I'm tired of going to this noise complaint. We should be out catching bad guys, not only this noise complaint. And I remember this lieutenant, big SWAT guy, TAC guy. And he said, you know what? He said, officer, let me explain something to you. He said, you don't understand this right now. He said, but at 2:00 in the morning when your baby can't sleep and your wife has to get up to go to work tomorrow and she's crying, you haven't slept all night, there is nothing more important to you than that noise complaint. And it just resonated with me because that was a guy that had been around and knew that there is nothing more when you don't have peace in your home, when you have peace in your neighborhoods, it just creates a tension and it creates a sense of I can do whatever I want. And, we're not going to tolerate that, and interesting enough. So we talk about spring break specifically. We're not a traditional spring break destination. We're not, the old Daytona Beach, if you will, back in the day, or Fort Lauderdale spring break. But about 10 years ago, we had, for whatever reason, we had gotten discovered by a lot of the fraternities and sororities in the schools across the Southeast. And traditionally, we were not that type of environment because, quite frankly, it's too expensive to vacation here to do that. So, $10,000 a week rooms, we were not prepared for college kids coming in and doing that. So year one, there was kind of a nationalized effort across the Southeast, at least, to make the Destin area a spring break destination, meet up in Destin kind of deal. And it caught us off guard because we were not familiar with that. And so we issued, an obscene amount of notice to appears, which are essentially summons. I don't know what they call it in California, but basically you're getting this rest. But we found that these kids all had disposable incomes. It was a badge of honor. They were making their TikToks with it. They were doing, this a little bit before TikTok, but they were taking their pictures, posting, oh yeah, I'll be back, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, this is clearly not working. So we're going to try something else. And we developed what we call the rule of 3, which is every underage possession of alcohol the next year goes to the Walton County Jail. Now, we don't take them in back and put them with hardened felons and, or things like that. But what we did is make them drive 65 miles to the county jail. And it took 3 of their friends and GPS to find it, which ruined a whole night. And after we arrested about 1,000, amazingly, Chief, over the next year or two, we started choking this problem down. And I think now we arrest on average that we actually have to take less than 100 because we deal with it. Now we're actually facing a new challenge now, which is, and it's a sign of our times, is in our really high end vacation area. We have people coming and it's their 13, 14, 15-year-olds. Well, you got to handle those kids entirely different. Handling a juvenile, as you well know, is a different animal. Sure. So there's always adjusting challenges, but the thing about it is we adhere to the belief that quality of life initiatives and law enforcement speaks to the overall health of a community. You show me a community that won't arrest for petty theft or retail theft or disorderly intoxication and all that, and I'll show you a place with homeless problems. Yeah. I'll show you a place with theft problems. I'll go to a place that people don't want to live. People don't want that. And so in Florida, and again, with all due respect to our brothers and sisters in law enforcement across the country, but Florida has a specific statute in Chapter 30. Florida statute says the sheriff will absolutely conserve the peace. And here comes this last line: with a strong hand.
Wow.
To quell disturbance and riots. And so the Florida legislature, as protests were going on in 2020, and we saw this looting and rioting in a lot of places, the Florida legislature went back and said, hey, we're serious about this. Mm-hmm. Sheriff, you will double down. So there's no state police in Florida, right? There are a couple of different state police agencies that have certain areas of responsibility, but there's no overall state police. That is constitutionally charged the sheriffs in every county in the state of Florida to be the chief law enforcement officer. Mm-hmm. And so if, for instance, I allowed riot and destruction of property, the legislature could move to remove me from office for failure to do my duty. And so I just said to people, I said, you're not going to see that in Florida, not for long, because unless the community wants it, unless the community tolerates it, you're just not going to. A sheriff in Florida, and I don't care if they're the most liberal sheriff or the most conservative sheriff, they're not going to do it because they are constitutionally mandated to bring order to that. And so, that doesn't mean, again, I'm not trying to say be a jackbooted thug, but but there is a riot law in Florida, basically a protest law that says you start destroying property, so for me not to take action is a dereliction, abdication of my duty, and you can be removed from office from that.
Well, as it should be
Sure.
everywhere. Absolutely. And again, I used the word a minute ago about another example you gave, but these concepts are foreign. They're literally foreign to so many, not only law enforcement officials, but lawmakers. Right. And I know I keep going back to my unfortunate example, my current residence in the state. But what you said is just, it wouldn't even be understood, let alone accepted. These types of things. Well, people have the right to do this, they have the right to do that. It's all about what the lawbreakers' rights are, which are not rights, quite frankly.
Yeah, your personal. Rights. So listen. Everybody wants to talk about their rights, and nobody wants to talk about responsibilities.
That's right. That's right. That's why. Listen, one of our tenets is self-responsibility on this show. Because look, Sheriff, sorry to jump in, but in other words, you're hitting on so many important points about the rule of law. And I tell people, look, we all, whether you're in law enforcement, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a sanitation worker, whether you're a dog trainer, whether you're a professional football player, you're an airline pilot, you're a car salesman, doesn't matter what it is, we should all learn to be our own first responders. What I mean by that is the first thing that we have to do as individual members of our communities is to abide by the law. That's the first response to law enforcement, is actually abiding by the law. And then being your brother's keeper, so to speak, about speaking out, which I do in my own neighborhood sometimes, about, petty things, about, leaving trash cans on your street or things like this.
Chief, it's the social contract.
Absolutely. There's the word.
The same people that don't push their, I always give it the same people that don't push their grocery carts back, right?
That's right. 100%. By the way, the other day, it's just, anecdotes are awesome. The other day, I'm at a grocery store. So on Saturday afternoon, picking up some food to cook for the family that night, family and friends. And in front of me, I'm not kidding, she must have been at least 95 years old, this lady by herself. Mm-hmm. The sweetest little thing. She was tiny. She's all of 90 pounds, pushing a fully loaded shopping cart. And when the back boy loaded everything up, he said, "Ma'am, do you need some help with your car?" And she said, "Oh, no, I'm fine. I'm fine." And I go, wow, it's about 90 degrees. And off she went out the door. And I wanted to go help her. It took a long time for me to get to the line. By the time I got out, turns out she was parked not too far from my car. Mm-hmm. The last thing I saw before she got in her car, she'd already unloaded all these groceries. She was pushing her cart across this parking lot back to the stall.
Different generation.
It's a different generation. And I thought, my God, this is what it comes down to. Self-responsibility, that social contract. The phrase you use is so right. It's so poignant. Ownership and pride and understanding. I'm usually my own worst problem. If people thought like that, other than blaming external forces on whatever life brings, we'd be much better off. But this is excellent. We're talking about is, and again, the broken window theory is like 2 plus 2. I don't care how old it is. You're 100% right. It works. Your example of those kids not coming back, or at least not coming back and committing the same violation they did before, what better example is there? They learned that's unacceptable, not in this county. And here we're going the opposite way across this country in so many jurisdictions. I know you're aware of that, but again, I hope people are listening to learn from you about what you're doing. And I know that carries on into the breaking, enterings, and cars, and the petty thefts at the Walmart. I know from your chief operations how seriously you take that, how hard you work to solve those petty crimes. And I know it works very, very well, and it ensures a quality of life in your county.
Yeah, you know what? And listen, at the end of the day, I live here. It matters, right? It matters to me. And one of the things about the adherence to the rule of law is it's not what I want it to be; it's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people that a lot. For instance, we'll have maybe a crime that's gets a lot of press, and maybe there's a push to make an arrest. You've got to make the arrest. You got to make an arrest somebody. Well, I'm not in the arrest somebody business. I'm in the arrest the right people business, right? And so that I think that's the advantage of being a sheriff too. Quite honestly, is because we'll just say, look, we're this is the limitations of the law. This is what the law is. We can't make an arrest. I've fundamentally found, I don't know if you feel this way, Chief, but most of the time, people don't always expect success. They expect effort.
Mm-hmm.
They expect an honest effort. And if you'll communicate the honest effort, even when you don't solve the crime, most people are okay with that. They know, maybe it's, I probably shouldn't have left my keys in the car with the gun sitting on the front seat. The sheriff's office did the best they could, but and so I tell my wife, this is a supportive area for law enforcement. The area of Florida here in the Panhandle is extremely supportive of their men and women in law enforcement, public safety. I mean, the Florida legislature this year just passed, which is the strongest, most pro law enforcement piece of legislation I've seen in my 30 plus years. I don't know anybody that's seen anything like what they just passed. And it is a myriad of things, up to and including, hey, by the way, if you'll come from out of state here, we'll give you a $5,000 hiring bonus to help you move with your expenses. And then I'll match another $5,000 on top of it, right? Hey, Florida will give you an equivalency. Florida gives you $25,000 if you're a law enforcement officer, if you adopt a child, to help you through the adoption process.
Wow.
They, paying for the education. If their officers are wounded or killed in the line of duty, we pay for the education of your children, your family, to make sure that you're taken care of. I mean, just a litany of things that are so doubling the homestead exemption on our taxes, a tax break for law enforcement officers that are working to come to these communities. So,
Fantastic.
and I think it speaks to this philosophy. And by the way, that passed both Democrat and Republican in the Florida legislature.
That's wonderful.
Pretty strong. Yeah.
It is wonderful, and it's an example of how people with different general political philosophies can come together on the basics, the civility of a society. These are the things that we used to share common ground with. That again, except for places like Florida, are all too rare across the country. There's another topic that I really want to talk about. Because it's rare, but obviously incredibly impactful. Something obviously recently in the news, Uvalde, Texas, is an example of these school shootings, these active shooter incidents. And what you're doing there in Walton County is another example of where you as a sheriff and the department as a whole have been very proactive, not responsive, but proactive when it comes to this topic. And I understand that you actually have deputies at each of the schools in Walton County, and in addition to that, you actually employ, so to speak, you utilize citizens there as well as
Guardians.
Part of that team. And I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that before we start winding things down, because it's such an impactful thing, but it shows how proactive you are as an agency.
So, and this is I think the worst nightmare any of us can imagine, right? Anything that's happening with our children. after Sandy Hook, we made a philosophical decision here that we were going to place deputy sheriffs in every school. And, what you used to put in schools was the man or woman who was retired on duty, didn't want to push that green and white anymore. Maybe they did. And we said, you know what? We're not going to have those people around our kids. We want people that want to be around these children, that have a heart for working with kids, but are also prepared to do battle should it come to that. So we did that. That was, I think Sandy Hook was 2014, maybe something like that.
I believe so.
Yeah. And then February,
2014.
Yeah. And then February of, 2018, the Marjory Stoneman Douglas massacre took place in Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Southern Florida, Broward County, Florida, where just, unbelievable tragedy, killing of those kids, and a coach named Aaron Weiss who tried to intervene and stop that gunman. After that, oh, by the way, the sheriff of Broward County, Florida, was removed from office for the failure of his deputies to prevent that. Wow. So at the end of the day, that's the captain of the ship. So you have to know that when you sign up for this job. Governor Rick Scott appointed me to chair the immediate response to Marjory Stoneman Douglas, to give the legislators some, let's do something. And I'll, if you've been around government long, you know that they don't act fast with anything. Yeah. But I can tell you from about 15 days after our initial recommendations, they had passed substantive legislative change in Florida law. And what it said was, you're going to put, Sheriff, you will put deputies in every school in the state of Florida, period. If there is 999 students, there'll be a deputy. If there's 1,000 to 199 to 1,099, there'll be 2 deputies. And I mean, if one of them has to step across the street, there'll be another deputy called in off the road to replace them. So we were already ahead of the curve here because we had already taken that stance.
Right.
But it also authorized what is called the Guardian program, and it allowed the sheriff in each county to make a decision as to whether or not to arm volunteers, citizens, teachers as deemed appropriate. And I realize what a controversial subject that can be. Yeah. But there was already a caveat in Florida law that allowed a special deputy. And so for instance, in Walton County, we've done it both ways, which I met with my superintendent here, and we had who's an elected official. The superintendent in this county is elected. And we had a heart to heart about what they wanted and how we could best protect these students. So everything from a security plans to thoughtful hardening of schools where we can. But then the discussion came up about arming these folks. Mm-hmm. And what I said was this: they have to meet a standard. We have to ensure the adherence to the standard, and we have to make sure that we have the right people before this. I'm going to sign my name to this. And we went out and created, I think, and hired with the school district here, and I give them a lot of credit. They hired these individuals, and I empowered them to bear arms in the defense of children. And, I think we've got the right people. I think it is all about, adherence to a set of principles and to standards. But it absolutely increases our presence and our ability to deter those who would do harm. These guardians are not anybody that just decided they'd walk in and said, "Oh, I was in the Army 20 years ago. I'm going to be a guardian." That's not the way that works. I have to sign off. I sign those personally. And, because I need to make sure that they achieve a certain level of training, retraining, and understanding of what's expected, and that they can shoot and perform at a certain level. So, yeah, I mean, I think it can be a somewhat controversial program for some folks. Somebody said, well, what about teachers? Should a teacher can be a guardian? What I do is the superintendent will send me, if there's somebody that he has an interest in, we look at their background. They go through the polygraph. They do a psychological exam. They go through training. They go through a lot of range time, and they have a very narrow scope of authority, which is this: put yourself in harm's way to save a child. It's no more complex than that.
Excellent. And by the way, I didn't know about about the teachers. Do you have a fair number of teachers who are guardians?
No, you actually do. You have a couple. You don't have that. That's actually most of them are full time guardians.
Gotcha.
These are folks that they said, hey, we want them. Uh, I'm not a real big fan of bifurcation of duties.
Yeah.
I'm not. If you're a teacher, you're a teacher. I don't want your mind split. And the other thing is that I was super concerned with was the retention of those weapons,
Hmm.
because those weapons, the worst, the two things that happen. One is you misplace that weapon, you use that weapon in the wrong, it's not in the proper holster, it's not properly retained, you've left it in a purse, you've left it in your car. We had to eliminate that as a potential possibility. And then most people did not want the burden of the standard we set for the guardians.
Right.
It's not I've got a concealed weapons permit. It's way more to it than that. So we've set a pretty high standard, but I think the school district, I've been super pleased. And I can't say enough about our superintendent here, Mr. Russell Hughes. He fundamentally gets it. We ran an active shooter table, an exercise actually this last Friday. And so you end up having, 40 or 50 deputies. We shut down a school afterwards, and we ran through a full active shooter simulations, the whole 9 yards to see. And we said, you know what, break it. Let's figure out where our weak points. Let's break it. Let's figure out what it is. And we found areas that needed improvement,
Right.
but he was willing to work with us on that, which was super important.
Well, the partnerships, it's the word's overused, but true partnerships are again come down to to principles, to a focused objective, and to have a partner like that in the school district is a blessing for you and the students. And going back to the point that only a couple, I guess, of the teachers have decided to be guardians goes to the professionalism and the level of standards around the guardian program. In other words, you exclude a lot of people who voluntarily say, hey, no, it's not for me. That's a good thing. We're not putting people in place that shouldn't be there, that don't want to be there,
Absolutely.
that are questioned about. This is a screening process. And thank God for them knowing that this is not right for me. That's what we want. We only want people in those places that feel comfortable and are proficient.
Wow, that's a right and Chief. That's a rights and responsibility, right? Again,
Right.
you may have the right to bear arms, you may not have the responsibility to be responsible of it, and that's an important distinction.
Well, it is, and it kind of bleeds right, perfectly into the segue is perfect. The next thing I want to talk about, and that's really the effect, or maybe no effect, of the fairly recent ruling by the Supreme Court about the permitting of firearms, CCWs across the country. That there's no longer a need to prove you need to carry a weapon. I'm curious. Was there any real effect in the state of Florida, in the county of Walton, after that ruling from the Supreme Court, or is it more status quo?
So a couple of things. One, that New York case that you're talking about, that they struck
Yes.
down the CCW, concealed weapons permit. Florida has a very robust concealed weapons program. But I will tell you, I think philosophically, I have spoken to legislative leadership and going forward, and the governor has been pretty open about this, that I think they're going to end the concealed weapons permit program in the state of Florida. Now, that hasn't happened, but if you ask me to lay money on it, I will tell you I think that is going to come to an end. And there's a couple of reasons for that. That's actually one that's easier for me to agree to, because quite frankly, the only people that are getting concealed weapons permits are people that are honest and adhere to the law. I mean,
Right.
so we're getting the people that are going and already signing up and doing that. I think that is probably going to be the law of the land in Florida in about a year.
Gotcha.
Florida has reciprocity with other states on their concealed weapons permit. But there is, I couldn't venture to how many concealed weapons are issued in the state of Florida, but it is a bunch. Florida is a very gun-friendly state. Maybe is the appropriate word for that. I think the issue for us will come down to whether or not they allow open carry, which is a little bit different, right?
Big difference, actually.
And listen, I've been very, very open about this. I'm not in favor of open carry for a couple of reasons. Having been involved in youth sports, if you see the way people act in youth sports, I can tell you Uh, if carrying a rifle across your back or carrying a weapon in public was a bad idea in Tombstone, it's a bad idea for Disney World. So,
well, on that, I agree with you. I think that again, just personally speaking, I don't need to see a necessity for the open carry.
right.
Matter of fact, I think that concealed carry is probably more effective because it's really good to keep the bad guys guessing. It
Absolutely.
really is.
Absolutely. The other thing's about intimidation if you're not careful.
That's right. That's exactly right. Which can cause a problem that previously exists. So,
right.
That's my take on that.
Agreed. I'm 100% in the same boat with you.
Well, I'll tell you what, Sheriff, this has been fascinating, but I do want to finish up with this. We've talked about so many things. You probably covered a lot of what might be in your answer, but I want to give you a chance as a true leader in law enforcement to share with the listeners, the viewers, what you think is the most challenging or some of the most challenging issues that are facing law enforcement in general as we move forward the next 5 or 10 years.
So, I'm glad you give me this opportunity, Chief, because I will tell you, I had a chance to start working at about a year or two ago with a gentleman by the name of Simon Sinek. He's an author. You may be familiar, pretty well known. If you've ever seen his TED Talk on millennials, or had a book called Start with Why. And Simon had an interest in law enforcement and making sure that the heart of what policing is about in this country, understanding it was under attack and how to make it really an incubator, if you will, for a new way of thinking about law enforcement. And it revolves around something you started this podcast with, which is leadership. And what we believe to be Peelian, after Sir Robert Peel, Peelian principles, that we lost that along the way. And, so we as a group, it's branded, if you will, called The Curve. And there's a couple of reasons for that. But The Curve is put together with this philosophy of increasing law enforcement leadership training and philosophies to get to the point that we reach a tipping point across this country of producing law enforcement leaders and what they should be. I think the dearth of law enforcement leadership is our biggest challenge today. And I think if we don't do something professionally, I watch chiefs, law enforcement leaders from across the country. And I don't want to say I'm not passing judgment, because I guess I am at some point, capitulate to things that I believe are fundamentally against their oath of office.
Mm-hmm.
And it bothers me. I saw the police chief, and I apologize. I think she was out of Seattle, maybe Seattle.
Yes.
And, they fired her up there.
Yes.
And I thought, now here, this chief, she is trying to do the right thing and hold the line. And man, that's a tough spot to be in. That's a tough spot to be in. And that's what scares me about this, when county commissions or city councils or state legislature start to micromanage or start to try and manage what laws will and will not be enforced, and the tactical manner or the practical manner in which they're going to be carried out. Scares me a lot. It scares me a lot. And I think leadership, preparing leaders to move forward at all levels of law enforcement over the next 5 to 10 years may be the biggest challenge. Because listen, the storm's going to come one way or the other, right? Whether you're anti-law enforcement, pro-law enforcement, but it's in the leadership and the preparation of those leaderships, administrations, that we're going to get the good and the bad. And I don't think we're doing enough to really train the next generation of law enforcement leaders and say, listen, well, what do I stand for? What do I stand for? And I actually think you can go back to Sir Robert Peel's principles from 1839, 1840. They stand today. They stand the test of time. And I think we should go back, and we're a profession that has lost our sense of history of who we are. I think it was abrogated by the Civil War. Yeah. I think we bifurcated I think we got slowed down by a lot of different things, but I think we go back to those founding principles of Sir Robert Peel and we start pushing that as a leadership.
Well, hate to sound like a broken record, but once again, I agree with you with Robert Peel, with the we're becoming unmoored from our founding principles, our founding documents, and that's really where, along with someone like Robert Peel with his philosophies about law enforcement, that is where modern law enforcement its roots are. And once we become unmoored from those things, again, it becomes chaotic, and people find themselves in positions of quote unquote leadership in law enforcement agencies, but they're simply working at the whim of whoever put them
Sure.
there, and they're nothing but a bureaucrat with a badge and a gun. It's not true leadership. So I'll tell you what is true leadership, sir. It's you. I know this from research. I know it from word of mouth, and I certainly have seen it from being a frequent visitor to Walton County. It's absolutely been an honor, a privilege, and a pleasure to have you on Your Leo Nation, Walton County Sheriff Michael Adkinson. God bless you. Thank you for what you have done for so many years. Thank you for what you're going to do. And thank you for being a true leader and example for others around this country. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person. Maybe my next trip down there, I'll look you up, buy you breakfast or lunch, and I look forward to having you on again. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having us, and thank you to your listeners.
Thank you, folks. Don't forget Your Leo Nation, where it's right above me right there. Yep, I got there right this time with right in. YourLeoNation.org. Go there. Tell your friends about it. There's a donate button there. Please click on that. That goes to our nonprofit partner. That's not YourLeoNation.org. That is the Leo Project. It's a nonprofit. It's tax deductible. And we are supporting the families of fallen officers. God bless all of you. God bless America. Sheriff, we'll talk soon. Everyone, have a great day. Bye-bye.